Good morning to you, or afternoon or evening, depending when and where you're listening to this in the world. This is the SitRep, the situation report, where I go through news stories from the past 24 hours and we have a look at it from the perspective of prepping to keep ourselves better prepared. Because I assume, if you're listening to this, then you are somebody who wants to be more self-reliant, more resilient, and more responsible for your life. So that's what this is all about. If you haven't seen it before, Reagan on YouTube. Hey, how you going? Thanks for joining me. Yeah, I'm Gads, and this is what we do every couple of days or so. We go through these news reports and have a look at them. So that's what we're going to do today. I keep threatening that we're going to go back to old mate in Kiev, and I will. Just rolling up my sleeves because shit's about to get real. No, it's not right. It's just, same sort of stuff. Let's jump into it today, though, with some news stories that are interesting. Taking over the mantle of Captain Obvious for today is none other than Vladimir Putin. That was the same Vladimir Putin who was Times Magazine Man of the Year 15 years ago, yesterday. Although he wasn't named it yesterday, that was actually his arch enemy now. The illustrious Zelensky made the cover. Good for him. Anyway, what has Putin come out and said? He has said that the threat of nuclear war, quote unquote, is growing. No shit, Sherlock. You're the one who's doing it. You're the one with the finger over the button who's pushing us closer to World War III and nuclear fallout. So yeah, it's growing because you're doing it. But an interesting point here is he noted that Russia still, they keep saying this, we will only use our nuclear weapons to defend itself. I say that's kind of what they've always been saying, but there's also some other things mixed in there with the language that if you've been paying attention, you might have caught slightly. The difference between retaliatory and defending yourself. So now what I can see happening is Russia very much sowing the seeds of self-defense, which they've already been doing for quite some time now, but I can see that getting pushed further. On the other side, the US side, the other people with all the nukes, they're very much not in that camp anymore. They, in case you missed this, a few weeks back, they did change their policy around this. So as far as I can tell, they do have it quite within their scope to strike first. So interesting that US has come out that on that sort of footing. They've come out and said, look, we're ramping up our nuclear arsenal again. We're dusting it off and shining it up, getting it ready to roll. And, we're not afraid to use these. Whereas Russia said, we're not afraid to use these, but we will not do it first, or at least we'll only do it to defend ourselves. So interesting stuff. It is, there was kind of like, I'm paying attention to how much rhetoric and stuff like that's going on around the nuclear sort of spiel. And there is a little bit of a dip. Like a couple of weeks ago, it was hot. And maybe a couple of weeks before that, it was red hot. It was like very, very serious. And then you saw, beginning with US's policy around China, or at least what they were saying about China, a 180, where they were like, whoa, backpedal, let's actually start bringing some peace into the world. Which I marked at the time and said, hey, I don't know who got in the ear of whom, but somebody with a bit of sanity, somebody with a couple of brain cells in their head is clearly having words into Biden's ear or into the current US administration's ears, collective ears, and calming the situation down. That's what it looked like was happening. So now we've got the banner coming out again. Putin's pushing it out again. Which I find like more ironic that he is the one instigating talks about nuclear weapons again by saying that nuclear war is growing. The threat of nuclear war is growing. Of course it is, because you're saying this shit. You idiot. Anyway, that's my little Captain Obvious one for today. Here is a really interesting one. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Something come across one of the. I can't even remember where I saw it. It was like a European one, but it may be centered around Germany because it was a German story. That they used something like 3,000 law enforcement officers to arrest somewhere between 25 to 45 people. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And they kind of said it was some sort of right-wing conspiracy group or something. And I was like, okay, righto. Like everything is now. Yep, you're not with the narrative. You're a right-wing conspiracy theorist. And I kind of looked at it and went, okay, that's sort of interesting, but I'll just let that one slide. Well, it turns out that it is a lot more interesting than I thought. It was a coup attempt, allegedly. And not just any coup attempt, a coup attempt with at its head Heinrich the 13th, who is actually of royal lineage in the old German system, which was pre-World War II German system. He was the part of the family that was, the Kaiser, the chief, the king there in that country, until the collapse of the Weimar Republic, or the creation of the Weimar Republic within that space there. But apparently this guy's come out and has publicly advocated for the idea that life is actually better under a monarch. And I don't know how that makes you feel, but I struggle to argue with this. I really do. I've thought about it a long time. I used to be quite a progressive and thinking like, yeah, we are evolving and getting better as we go along. Like, yeah, we had these evil overlords and all their slave serfs who had to work for them. And then, we got this system and we've moved into the industrial age, and then we've got parliament, and then we've got blah, blah, blah. And then I realized sort of where it's going, where the division of power is going from up top to lower to lower to lower. And I was like, actually, I guess the extension of that is communism. So how does communism work? Let me get into this for a little bit. And my research showed me that what I found from communism was that I didn't like it at all. It is actually anti-individualism. So that led me to think, maybe I need to relook at this sort of stuff. What is a monarchy actually about? Is it one person ruling with an iron fist? Not necessarily. That's some of the ways that we have experienced it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. And there are certainly examples right now today where it is not like that. However, the big kicker for me was watching how Australians vote and many other countries vote, and then thinking, I thought democracy was a cool idea. But all democracy really does is give a voice to idiotic people who maybe should not be voting anyway. Controversial, I know. But I do view large swathes of human beings on the face of the planet at the moment as idiots. And if that triggers you, then feel free to be triggered. I don't really care. But I think, there needs to be another system that we can work with, but certainly within some countries, I've seen them work under a monarchy and be very, very happy. When people live in those countries who actually, it sounds weird to me because I don't want this, but actually want to be told what to do. That's what they want. And then I started comparing that to our world, and I thought, hang on, these people that I'm calling idiots maybe aren't idiots. They just want to be told what to do. And that's the way they vote. They vote for the people who tell them what to do and how to think and make them feel safe. Essentially, what a monarch would do. Anyway, there's more to this. I've got much deeper philosophical thoughts about this, but I'm not going to go into it. I just thought this was fascinating that a place like Germany could have a potential coup. So they're saying that we stopped the coup, by arresting these 25 people and this Heinrich the 13th, that they were looking to perform a coup d'etat and overthrow the current government and take over, saying that what Germans need right now is a monarchy. Fascinating stuff. You can't write this shit, honestly. Like, this is like the plot to a Bond film right now. That's why it piqued my interest. I was like, wow, this is super interesting. Not the only coup that's happened, funnily enough, though. We've also had another one in Peru in the past 48 hours. So Peru president has been removed from office. That was Pedro Castillo, if you're non-Spanish speaking person, who, kind of took power, started changing things around, and then everyone went, hang on, this is not right. There's a lot of rioting that's been happening in the past 48 hours in Peru, and apparently they've just removed their president in that country. I did see something that they had sworn in someone else who was the opposition leader, or the whoever the other party was, which is actually Peru's first female president. That's what I read, and I didn't snap a photo of that story, so I can't actually give you the details. But again, like 2 coups in 48 hours, interesting stuff. Interesting from the perspective of exactly what I'm keep talking about here, the increase in violence, the increase in turmoil, especially political turmoil that we've seen going on at the moment. I'm certainly not tracking it in any sort of statistical way, but anecdotally, it does seem to me that our politics all over the world, but especially within the West, seem to have this flux going on at the moment. I mean, just look at the UK at the moment, what's been happening there. Peter Rouse says this story has got more media attention than Brazil. Yeah, it has. There's still Brazil stuff that's happening as well that I'm seeing. These two though were particularly like fascinating to me for the perspective of like, this is life imitating art, imitating life. All right, let's jump over to Saudi Arabia right now. China has just done some massive trade deals with Saudi Arabia. So Xi has flown over there, shook hands with Salman, and it's all good. It is all good. I'm not going to go into all of them, but like Huawei, that massive Chinese phone company that no one likes. Well, Saudi Arabia likes them. They're going in there and they're building infrastructure. There's EV companies that are going to build factories there in Saudi Arabia. Chinese aluminium company. New trade deals come as China President Xi said that we will carry forward our traditional relationship and usher in a new era of China's relations with the Arab world. Very much tying up some of that sweet black gold for China, which it's interesting from a geopolitical perspective, just in of itself, right? This is the main thing where I looked at this and go, okay, well, this is more of the BRICS nations forming, solidifying their power, and China especially solidifying its power. The other really interesting thing about this is watching how much Biden is failing right now. He has flown over to Saudi Arabia. He originally tried to make deals with Saudi Arabia and it started to tank, and they could see them leaning into China. So he threatened Saudi Arabia. Then he took back those threats and he flew over there and tried to like shake hands. Still, nothing happened. No deal. No big deal for them to continue on the petrodollar cartel. Then he came back and threatened again. Then he flip-flopped again and started sweetening the deal. Recently, they just dropped all the charges. That journalist that mysteriously disappeared after walking into the embassy, that just got dropped in the past 48 to 72 hours by Biden administration. So they were like, no, don't worry about it. That's not a thing. We're all cool. There's no charges there. Then we see China roll in there, and they're just like, yep, China, shake my hand, deals are done. So apart from the solidification of BRICS power, what we're seeing is the degradation of US power. And this is, in of itself, it's just a deal for trade between two countries. But the bigger picture here is what we're witnessing with this deal, or deals, because there's multiple deals that have happened here. What we're witnessing here is the blood in the water. It's not just the blood in the water now. Everyone can see that US has its pants down, really. They can see there's no one at the wheel. There's no one competent at the wheel at the moment. And everyone's like, all right, this is a huge step. I would even mark this as one of those big turning points, a key thing like this. It's going to have bigger implications in the future. Not just fuel prices either. Much bigger implications as people start to look at the US and go, not as strong as we thought you were, not as popular as we thought you were, not as influential as we thought you were. And most of these geopolitical games are based on thought, because it's just the thought that drives things like stock markets. It's the sentiment. It's how people feel about these things. All right, here's an interesting story that was sent to me from my main source, talking about, this is from the Telegraph in the UK, talking about blackouts. What's blackouts going to do? Blackouts will trigger people's revolt against a new eco-tyranny. Green policies are popular in theory, but can only be sustained if they don't threaten our quality of life. And I've said this a couple of times now. I truly believe it, that in the West, where the spoiled child, really, we're used to having a lot of stuff and things. We're not really willing, as a whole, to give up those things. The theory of being green is all great as long as we still get to cruise around. It's when they start saying you cannot eat meat. It's when they start saying you cannot drive your car between these periods. You cannot fly in a plane anywhere. That's when people are starting to go, I don't know about this. And it's when they say you cannot have electricity all the time. That's when people are going to hit the streets. That's when we're going to see real turmoil, as in civil unrest, widespread civil unrest, I believe at least. Blackouts will trigger a people's revolt against the new eco-tyranny. It won't wash. Quote, it won't wash. The politicians have a choice. Make greenery consumer-friendly harnessing technology to preserve the public's quality of life, or face a calamitous democratic uprising. Couldn't agree more. Bad things happening. Australia's diesel price spike causes rethink in reliant regional areas. This is coming out of The Guardian in Australia. We had to rethink the ways we do things, says farmer who dusted off his 1973 petrol-powered truck. I'm actually anecdotally seeing this a little bit around me, is people starting to go, I might go petrol at the moment because petrol is cheaper right now. Why is petrol cheaper? It's very, very complicated and also not complicated, but essentially, like, it really shouldn't be cheaper than diesel. So there's a bit of a warning within that. It's not to say that diesel should be cheaper. It's just to say that diesel shouldn't be more expensive, or at least as more expensive as it is right now than compared to petrol. Well, at points, it's 20 to 25 cents more expensive, like on average here in Australia per litre. So, like, and that should not be. It's a less refined substance. So it should be cheaper in theory. But like I said, there's other things at play here. Now, pretty much all farming equipment runs off diesel. That's pretty much what this story is going on about here. That we're looking down the pipeline of what I've been saying for a long time, that if these fuel prices continue to go up, at some point farmers will go, this does not make sense. I will not make money. I will lose money. Why would I work my friggin' ass off for an entire year and not make money? Not be able to pay my mortgage, my exorbitant mortgage, to a bank, or to whoever I'm paying it to. I'm not going to. The farmer's just going to go, I'm not going to. I'll fold. That's that. Or I'm just not going to plant crops this year because it's too expensive to do that. I don't have the money to do it, and I can't go further into debt in order to do it. I'm at limits. That's a sad story. We look at that sort of thing on an individual case and we go, that's a sad story, right? What happens when it's not in an individual case? What happens when it's systemic? When it's not one or two farmers, when it's the majority of farmers, when it's 50 to 60% of farmers say, I can't plant food, I can't do whatever I'm going to do this year. What happens to our food system then? I tell you what, the honest, hardy people of Australia will pull their man buns up and roll their sleeves up and walk away from behind the coffee machine and into the fields and do it all by hand. No, they won't. No, the vast majority of Australians wouldn't even know how to grow food, wouldn't even have a concept of how it actually gets grown, apart from some vague thing that like seeds get put in the ground and then water and then you pick it a couple of months later. If we don't have the machinery to do it, there's only one other machinery I know of to do it on that sort of level, which is human power. Hopefully we start getting some immigrants in, because I don't know if you've looked at the statistics on this, but again, a lot of Aussies don't want to pick their own fruit or pull their own root vegetables out of the ground. We get cheap labor from people who travel over here to do it. Slave labor. Peter Rouse says diesel cheaper in New Zealand. I wish that helped me. If it did, I'd get on a boat and come over, but I don't have that ability. C_SGR82 says man buns. Man buns? What about man buns? Tell me about man buns. Or are you just chuckling about the man buns? The picture of a hipster actually getting out into a field and working in the sun. Maybe 20 cents cheaper. Used to be half the price of petrol. Yeah, opposite in Australia at the moment. All right, let's talk about kids getting sick. So this one was sent to me directly from my main source, and it really struck me because I was walking around. I was actually talking to someone 2 days ago. I was like, it's just me, or is a lot of kids sick at the moment? Because somebody else, we met someone like, oh, hey, going, blah, blah, yeah, good. Oh, my child's like at home because they're sick. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I was like, hang on. I had to go to the chemist the other day, and there was a person sitting there going like, all 3 kids of his are sick. And they said something about that one of the classes or activities or something had to be cancelled because there's some sick kids. And the chemist there was like, yes, yeah, there's a lot of sick kids at the moment, like it's going around, there's something going around. And then I thought about it and I was like, actually 4 days ago, my other friend said there was someone sick. And then like a day before that, I remember somebody else said there was some sick kids. I'm like, is there like some sort of illness going around kids at the moment? Apparently there is. Here's some interesting data that's coming out of the CDC from the US. It's a graph, and I'll just give you the gist of the graph. It plots cases of flu throughout the year. So this part of the year, which is their winter. Okay, so they're coming into winter, they're expecting more flu cases, November, December, January, and you can see it going up in a line like that. And they've got, pre sort of COVID years, and then the COVID years where we go up, and it's higher. It's double, right? Last year was double what it had been. Kind of starts to kick off towards the end of November. You can see it start to go from like 0 up to something. The numbers, I can't quite see the numbers here, but just judging by what I'm looking at, previous years were about 2,500 kids getting diagnosed with it at around the start of December, end of November, start of December, 2,500. Last year, that was 5,000. Yeah, so doubled over a year. That's pretty big, right? This year, before we hit December, it was at 34,000. Like, this chart is, there's lines doing this, and then there's this one line that's just going up like this. That's nowhere near any other line. And you're like, what? That is something different. My first reaction to this was, we test for the flu. Back in my day, my mum just used to, I go, Mum, I'm sick. And she'd stand at the door and go, like, ask a couple of questions. How sick? Like, how you breathing? Would walk in, touch my forehead, and would deem whether I have the flu or not. If you don't have the flu, you go to school. Yeah, you're pretty hot. You've got the flu. That was as much testing as we had in 1987. But now, apparently, we test for this stuff. I was unaware. And I would also assume that part of this data that we're seeing here is that we are crazy with testing. So a kid gets sick now and they're like, quick, go test them for COVID right now. So that testing would be also part of why we're seeing this go through the roof. But it still is troubling. And the fact that anecdotally this lined up with what I was seeing in my town, I'm like, they're coming into winter though. We're in summer here and we've got sick kids. What's going on? It's almost like if you locked kids up for 2 years and didn't let them interact and transfer smaller diseases, that it would build up. And then when they're actually allowed to interact with each other again, bam! Oh shit, I've been keeping my child like germ free for 2 years and now they're exposed to germs and this happens. It's almost like human beings are meant to interact and have these germs floating around and deal with them when we deal with them, not build it up for two or 3 years. Yeah. Going South asks, what are green bombs? Peter Rouse says nuclear is green. That's actually not what I'm talking about. I will get to the green bombs. It's the last story I've got here. I've just got 2 more to go, and then I'll answer your question, Going South. Oh, foreshadowing. US power grid. So this fascinating thing that's been happening in North Carolina. They've was it North Carolina? Yeah, I think it was North Carolina. North Carolina. But like they've obviously been having these issues with it. Well, a new report's come out and said 7 power plants across America have been sabotaged. I didn't see what they're talking. I think in the last, what are we talking about here? I can't see the time period for it. In the last little bit. But who are they blaming for this? Take a wild guess. It's you right-wing extremists. Yeah, you right-wing extremist, you. Right-wing protests over drag events. What? Drag queens are reading books to kids. That's it. I'm going to go blow up a power station. Seems unlikely to me. Just on face value. I'm not saying it is or is not right-wing protest groups who are doing this. I'm just saying, to look at it from the surface, my bullshit meter goes off instantly. I'm like, I don't know about that. Why? Why would they do it? What would they gain from that? Seems odd. But the interesting part about this was 7 power plants across America have been sabotaged. One thing people don't realize, and it's events like this that I think help illustrate it to people, is our power grid everywhere, pretty much anywhere in the world, is extremely fragile. So sort out your own power. Peter says sabotage just as they are running drills. All right, let's talk about green bombs. Where do your priorities lie? When you're arguably the world's most powerful nation, when we have the situation in the world that we're facing at the moment, which is, potentially quite dire, where do your priorities lie? Now, we've just seen overnight there was a prisoner exchange, and this should tell you everything you need to know about where the US's priorities, and I'm talking about their administration, not individuals within the US, because I know there are some extremely canny, switched on, and prepared individuals within the US. I'm talking about the administration at the moment. Where do your priorities lie? What are you worried about? When you release somebody who is an arms dealer, is an international criminal, and you release them in exchange for somebody who plays sport and actually did a crime, in the place where they were. Forget the hypocrisy, for starters, on both of those counts, that you're getting somebody out of prison for marijuana possession. How many people right now are in the US in prison on marijuana possession? How hard is the government at the moment trying to push to curtail a US citizen's rights to bear arms, and they just released an arms dealer? Like, okay, where are your priorities? Anyway, let's talk about what the Pentagon's doing. Pentagon, who, just by the way, had just failed their 5th straight budget review. So they looked at the budget and they said, hey, did you guys make budget? Where's this? What was it, like 600? No, it was much more than that. It was 600 billion, I want to say. It was some like disgusting amount of money that was unaccounted for. And they do this every year. They're like, hey, where's all this money? And they're like, Pentagon stuff. It's probably around. Don't worry about it. And people go, oh, okay, we won't worry about it. You're doing the right stuff. We know you're doing the good thing. Anyway, I talked about this, that trillions, says Peter Rouse. That wouldn't actually surprise me, man. It's like, I remember reading and going, oh, that's a disgusting amount of money to not know where it is. Just not know. So what is Pentagon up to at the moment? I have talked about this a couple of times, that pumping munitions, weapons, and money into Ukraine will drain the resources of the countries that are doing it. And those countries are starting to find that out. And the US has been the latest one to signal, say, hey, just by the way, we're running out of bullets and bombs here. I mean, they're not running out of it. That's hyperbole. But they're saying, like, we can't continue giving this amount of munitions away to another country and not keeping some for ourselves and rebuilding it for ourselves. So we're going to need to rebuild for ourselves. And I was saying this yesterday or the day before, because I was like, hey, if you want to like make an investment right now, I would be investing into any company that makes machines of war right now, because you'll probably make a lot of money. I'm not advocating for that, by the way. I'm certainly not going to do it, but I'm just saying, if you want to make money, that's where the money's going to be. The war in Ukraine is draining US arms stockpiles while geopolitical risks grow. Yet the Biden administration is worried about the climate impact of US weapons and wants to impose costly green mandates on federal contractors. So, in answer to your question going south on YouTube, this is what I mean by green bombs. Okay, so what are you worried about right now? Nuclear war? Are you worried about defending your country? Are you worried about the looming threat that is China, that's about to start moving? Are you worried about North Korea? Are you worried about what's going to happen in the Middle East with Israel and Iran? Are you worried about Turkey and Syria or Kurdistan and or Greece? Are you worried about all those things? Or are you more worried about your bombs being green? Hey, if you're printing the money, I guess it doesn't matter, right? It's like, well, we could buy a normal bomb, which will cost us, $300,000, or we could buy the green version of that bomb, which will cost us $750,000. But it doesn't matter. We print the money, so money's irrelevant. It's taxpayer money. It's not my money. It's the US taxpayers all paying for it. I read this and I was just like, what? This is yet another thing where I was just like, what is going on? What is actually going on with the world? Is this the priority right now? And the fact that you think that like you could make weapons of war that are remotely green, and who are you advertising this to? Are you trying to get like the green, the people who are green on your side, saying, no, it's cool, we're fighting war, and I know you don't like war, but we're using green munitions. Look, I painted my 5.56 green, or 6.5 now. I think the US is switching over to as their standard. But I've painted it green, so it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. A little noticed rulemaking proposed by the Department of Defense, NASA, and General Services Administration last month would require federal contractors to disclose and reduce their CO2 emissions as well as climate financial risks. The rule would cover 5,766 contractors that have received at least $7.5 million US from the feds in the prior year. Damn. So if you're one of those almost 6,000 contractors that has received $7.5 million plus from the government for contracts of warlike activities, then you're going to have to prove to them that you're green. Interesting, fun side note here. That's kind of like how we would describe someone who is very, very army. When we're in the army, you'd be like, that dude's so green. And it didn't mean like new. It didn't mean like conscious of your CO2 output. It meant like you think you're Rambo or something. Like you are institutionalized and indoctrinated fully into the military. That's how green you are. Yes, well, that's so that's what I mean by green bombs, y'all. Fun stuff. This is the priorities of our leaders right now in our world. So what do I say about that? Should we rise up and overthrow our leaders? Not really. I think we should just go our own way. And that's what I continue getting up here and preaching, is that as much as we can, we want to take control of what keeps us alive. I take control of my food as much as I can and my water situation as much as I can. I try and secure my own land as much as I can and provide my own security, if you know what I mean. I look after my shelter, and I invest in myself, in my health, my well-being, my psychological well-being. I invest in my family and their health and well-being, and make sure that we are in the best position to look after ourselves. Because ultimately, these folks are not going to do it. If they're too worried about putting rainbows on the side of nuclear weapons, then they're not really that worried about what happens to us. And they will continue to spend our money in the form of taxation, theft, on these kind of arsenine schemes. So that's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the lively discussion on YouTube, Going South and Peter Rouse. Thank you, all of you, for jumping on there. Thanks again for everyone who's been jumping on and subscribing and hitting like and doing the thumbs up thing or whatever it is. Thanks for everyone who's been listening to on the audio version, wherever you download your podcasts. I really appreciate that. Until next time, gang, as always, stay safe, keep prepping, and I shall talk to you in the future. And until then, Semper Paratus.